Welcome back, Curious Hearts. I'm Vera. Together, in every episode, we get to explore what it is we really believe, how we practice, and we get to meet people who are on their own spiritual path. Together, we begin. I am so excited, first of all, to see your face, and also for people to get to know my other friend Bear. I keep telling my friends, I'm like, oh no, that's my other Bear. So I love that I'm collecting bears. If there are any other bears out there that want to be a bestie of mine, I'll just create a club of bears. I will just share. Bear and I met in a sort of kismet way. I went to an astrology conference in 2021, I think. 2021 or 2022, yeah. And we had lunch together, I think, the last day. We happened to be like sitting at a table together and like really, really appreciated each other's energy. And then we were in the elevator on the way out of the conference, like the last day, like everybody's leaving. And we were just like chit-chatting in the elevator. And I can't remember if you or I said like, I'm planning to go up to Seattle and just sort of like do some sightseeing. And it was like, yeah, me too. It was like, you want to go together? And a beautiful friendship was formed. So I just feel so grateful to have been on that trip and to have made that contact with you. So before we dive into questions, is there anything that you'd like folks to know about you or what you do during the day? Or where you're at?
Those elevator speeches are always one of the more difficult things to come up with because humans are so dynamic. But I think that if I were to introduce myself, it's like, hello, I'm Bear. My professional name is Lauren K. Hickman. I am an advanced practice social worker and a licensed clinical social worker associate. So I'm practicing to be a psychotherapist right now. But that's a newer hat that I've been wearing that's evolved out of being a professional astrologer for about 12 years. I have been a Reiki practitioner since 2002. And in 2022, the year I met Vera, I left a long-term relationship with a master teacher and kind of stepped into my own power in decolonizing the practice of Reiki and teaching from a more centered standpoint that tries to take away a lot of the flack that comes with what evolved from Reiki in the United States during the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and beyond that, essentially. So,
oh my gosh, we could talk about that for a really long time.
Absolutely.
I'm like, oh, we haven't actually done that yet. Okay.
Yeah.
It comes through in your voice, and I know from experience that it also comes through in your presence, that there is both a groundedness and a connectedness, sort of a combination, right, of which I think is probably all the years of Reiki practice, and I know all of your other spiritual practices. But I find it's very rare to meet someone that feels both like very grounded and very like in the right here, and also very like plugged in, like up there.
Mm-hmm. I'd say that
when I'm with you.
I'd say that one of the tasks that I've experienced is learning to be in this world, but not of this world. And I think that a lot of practitioners, feel like there's a more importance about like what happens after or the ascension piece of it, and I mean, I've talked at length in interviews with other astrologers and other podcasts that I've been on about like, I feel that it's more important to do the work here. And that it's just another spiritual bypassing or like a skip point to say, oh, this is an illusion. It's not important what we do on Earth. Everything happens in the afterlife or when we ascend.
Or it's happening on some like other plane. And like this is
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I have that same challenge.
Yeah, I'm more interested in what we're doing in our lives right now and what's in our immediate environments and how we're interacting with that. Because as above, so below. I mean, that's Hermetic law, that everything that we do in this reality that we experience, like if there is a reflection in the divine, how do we have access to both of those places? How do you stay in both lands? And that it's like having a foot in reality but also being aware that what we do matters. I'm not a nihilist.
Yeah.
I certainly have a lot of surprising faith in the human experience.
I love that as an entry point too. What was your spiritual life like growing up?
Oh,
Family of origin. Yeah.
yeah. I think that it was really, really wide open. I did have like Christian church experiences with my family. My dad had like Bible study videos, and I think that was his like, here, watch these cartoons about Jonah and the Ark, or Noah and the Ark. I don't know. Jonah and the Whale, Jonah and the Whale, Noah and the Ark, right? But it was really early on. I remember asking my grandmother as a small child, like, how is the earth made? And she busted out Genesis. And I was like, this is bullshit. Like, even as a 5-year-old,
you were like, mm-mm.
I'm not vibing with this at all. And I was really blessed to have this woman come into my life at an early age, right around that time, like 5-6 years old. And she was a babysitter for my family that came and like stayed with us when my parents were out of town for long trips. So I'm one of three sisters. I'm the middle child. You'll probably figure that out from our conversation if you're a middle child. And Dorothy Cunningham was an astrologer and an Aquarian, and she made me feel seen at a very early age. And I remember dinner table conversations as a very small child where the other kids went to bed, and I just wanted to sit and talk with her. Even though I didn't know what she was talking about, I wanted to be with her. And she told me that I was a spiritual warrior and that it was my job to like be a leader in thought and in spirituality as an Aries. And I just felt like so loved by this woman. And she never treated me like a child. She never pandered to me. She never patronized me. She always treated me as an equal coming up. And she would let me skip school so I could stay home and learn how to do Schuster cards with her. And she would, Schuster's a divination card set that I don't know anybody else. I've never, ever seen them anywhere except with my relationship with this woman. And I've
never heard of them.
Mm-hmm. They're a divination series that uses different archetypes and like thought and like the elements, but there's the astrology symbols are in them as well. And the way that you lay out a reading as if it's the Celtic cross meeting the 12 houses of the zodiac.
Wow.
Right. So it is a really effective divination technique. Tools are not really my thing, and we can get into that at some point if you'd like. But I really enjoyed learning from her, and she would take me to crystal shops. And I showed Vera before we started recording, like I'm staying in an Airstream, an Argosy 1977 Airstream in the middle of nowhere in New Mexico in the mountains. And I have a lot of my crystals with me. And it's because they're my friends. Like they are sort of like witnesses to my journey, and they're amplifiers, and they help me to stay grounded. But, again, tools, I don't necessarily need to have them around, but I really enjoy their companionship. And I just remember her taking me to these shops like Connections, and I was like 6 years old in Des Moines, Iowa. And there was no Buddhists there. There were no like spirituality. There was nothing in Des Moines for the most part, but there were a few really grounded individuals, this like gay couple that started this little crystal shop. And I had my first palm reading there. I had my first astrology reading there. And with Dorothy over the years, she turned from my babysitter into my therapist when I became a teenager. And I wouldn't say she was trained as a therapist, left the therapy psychology field because she felt it was too stringent. And just like Jung, found astrology to be just as effective, if not more so.
Yeah.
And I mean, those preliminary experiences, like I couldn't read a chart when I was a teenager. I had no interest. It was way too complicated. And there was just like the shiny lines and the little symbols, and like none of it really made sense to me. But when I read the books, when I would sit with her and she would look at me in the eyes and she would just say, "Hello, precious." And the way that she made me feel like I mattered,
Yeah.
Even as like a very broken, depressed teenager, she made me feel like a person. And I think that every reading that I offer, I start with a prayer that she shared with me that I've evolved a little bit, because I believe that you have to evolve everything that you touch. But I feel her in every reading that I offer, because she always brought so much joy and light and humor. And when I first started doing astrology readings, which I never ever imagined myself doing, I was very serious and very like intense. And someone channeled her for me, and she just said, like, Precious, like, you're taking this too seriously. Like, you need to lighten up. You need to smile while you're with people.
Take it easy.
Yeah. And she just was like purple robes, and she lived in this little tiny apartment. It was just covered in crystals. And she the way that she lived her life is this like kind of hermit, solitary crone. And she would always keep the place really tidy. And she'd say, like, I want to come home and feel like the person here respects me. And those little lessons and the way that she demonstrated her life really has impressed upon me since the very beginning of my journey. And it was such a fluke that I met her to begin with,
Fluke.
Yeah.
That's my bunny ears quotes. Fluke that you met her.
Yeah. Yeah. So she was a really important part of my path.
Yeah. And where is she now?
She passed away after a pretty intense stroke in 2014. I did get to go say goodbye to her, but she didn't remember who I was, which was probably one of the most painful goodbyes that I've had. But she asked about me to me, not knowing who I was. And yeah, so she's with me all the time. I talk to her just like anybody who's crossed over that I care about. And I just, I try to draw upon her wisdom and her life force energy to help support mine, because she really helped me through very difficult years and through addiction, and never judged me. She never judged me. She was like, you're an artist, and I understand you have to live your life very intensely in order to have something to write about, but she's like, I can't wait to see who you're going to become someday. She gave me a lot of faith.
Yeah. It's so remarkable that one person, right, can make that kind of extraordinary difference in our whole life.
Mm-hmm. She was invested, and she was my safe space to cry and to just talk about everything. And she taught me practices like writing letters and reading them and burning them. One time she had me get a black balloon, and I like let it go after doing this big ceremony and watched it disappear into the sky. And she brought in like ritual and ceremony in a really beautiful and powerful way. And the introduction to like the psychic realms and the intuitive realms. And, I think that like, I think the spiritual journey is always kismet, and it doesn't always make sense until you get older. I think that a lot, like if there's young people listening to this podcast, which I hope so, because Vera is such a good like torch holder for others, right? And just holding the light up while you're trying to figure out your own dark shit. But, I was introduced to like a Buddhist book in a library when I was young, and there was a little bookshop in Des Moines called Morning Light, and I found my my spiritual teacher that I worked with for over 20 years, from the time I was like 16 years old until I was almost 40, and she introduced me to my first Reiki teacher. My second Reiki teacher. I studied with another person from a different lineage, and got the blessing to go continue my studies with someone else. And that was like taking the Pepsi challenge for sure. But, with this woman, Diane Sweet, who I met at Morning Light Books in Des Moines, I studied occult wisdom, the Alice Bailey material, the 7 Rays of Wisdom. I, learned the Blavatsky material. I learned esoteric astrology. I learned metaphysics through this person. And it was a lot of like diligence, but I was also bonkers. And I have to like really have an emphasis in this as part of the journey, is that my suffering was so acute and my desire to leave this world was so tangible that I knew that if I didn't take my reality into my own hands, that I was not going to exist. I was going to unexist myself. And that desperation really is the gift. And I was desperate enough to start signing up for workshops. I think I took my first like Qigong class at 15. I started taking, doing acupuncture. I've had chronic UTI, kidney, and bladder infections since I was a baby. I would like to think that I came into this world pissed off, and hence I have these chronic issues that I still work with today, and I find a way to manage it. And certainly I've been hospitalized, especially when I was spine and feeling unsupported by the divine, things like that, these stories that come in. So I think that 15, 16, 17, these are like really powerful years of self-discovery. And I was running in between the spectrum of light and dark as quickly as I could, because I was a substance user, sex, drugs, rock and roll, total Scorpio stellium in the second house experience. And I was going to workshops and doing all of the love and light kind of crap on the weekend.
I know. I'm like, this is why it's like our charts are like so similar and so different. Like we both have that Pisces moon that's like, we're all one. I'm gonna go float off into the ether. And you're right, you're Libra rising, my sun in Libra, and then there are parts that are just like that Aries Scorpio piece in your chart is really
Mars and Scorpio.
Loud.
I think the Mars and Scorpio was like a big tail that wagged the dog for a long time. And now it's definitely my Venus in Pisces. And in esoteric astrology, the chart ruler for Libra rising is Uranus. And I feel like that is kind of the phase that I'm in right now. Uranus just passed over my Chiron and is, entering new territory. As soon as Uranus hit my ninth house cusp, I made the decision to move down here and just give everything away and go to New Mexico and live in an Airstream. Like this is, all of this is kind of like playing out.
Yeah, exactly. Really just like, wait, what? Just where are we going now?
Yeah. You don't know the details with astrology, and like I am not a predictive astrologer by any means. Usually it's about the looking for meaning and trying to find the themes and the patterns, right? And because astrology really is about pattern recognition as well as like the algorithm of a chart and feeling the energy, which is one of the ways that I think I do astrology differently than other people. But we'll get to that at some point. Yes. I think that to return to like the early experiences and kind of wrap that up in a nice way, that I was really screwed up and I was so desperate to change that I was selfishly taking as many classes as I possibly could. I never had any intention in becoming a teacher or becoming a spiritual guide or a psychotherapist. Like I just didn't want to die. I did not want to unalive myself. And I wanted to stop being angry at God. And God is a very like blanket term. So please, anybody out there, it's like, are we gods with a little g and there's this bigger picture, or is there a balloon that we're attached to in the divine?
The blanket we throw over the mystery, like whatever. Yeah. The good orderly direction. Like, I use that word as like it means 1,000 things and we just fit it into these 3 little letters. Let's, we can have that conversation a different day.
Yeah.
While all this is happening, you are a middle child. Right. What did the rest of your family, like how did they fit into this? Were you like the odd one out or?
Well, I think that my sojourn into spirituality is what helped me to link up with my mom for the first time, because we had a lot of dissonance. She didn't understand me at all. And she actually started studying astrology when I was a teenager in order to try to make sense of her children that she did not get. And so that was sort of a parallel experience that we had. But again, I did not want to touch astrology. That was too hard. I like things to be easy. So I didn't want to do it at all. And but that was the way we connected. My younger sister and I we've had our experience with substances. And I think that there was a lot of past life work with shamanism. And I mean, that's been my understanding, is that there's been rifts that she and I've had over and over again with who was the stronger of the spiritual guides, and the use of substances in that practice and addiction being part of things. So she and I've had a lot of karmic work to unravel. Mental health is always going to be a part of kind of those breakthrough moments. My elder sister has been very grounded. She was like a second mom to me. A lot of Capricorn energy in my family. My dad is incredibly neurodivergent. I have a whole root system in my family of these very oddball ADHD autistic kind of joint, but he's
Yeah.
actually the more intuitive of the two parents. Even though my mom's very spiritual and very ethical, he is definitely the more feeling intuitive piece of the branches of my tree. And on my father's side of the family, there are lots of psychics, so to speak, and we have an ancestor who called himself the water marvel, and he had a dream about how to teach water safety to people in the Midwest and in the South. And he traveled from place to place with this information that came through a dream and prevented hundreds of deaths by teaching people how to be safe in water, just by like dead man's float and learning how to tread water. And he learned those through a dream, through his dead father talking to him in a dream.
That is wild. I mean, this is the thing, like, you have such a unique and like different experience than I do, right? Because like I come from this very intellectual, practical, did it, right? And so I'm always fascinated to hear people's stories when there is a family lineage, right? And when folks are like, oh no, we have that gift in this family. This is the thing that we do. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's little Bear growing up. Where, and you can tell any part of this story that comes through, what does your spiritual life look like now? And is there anything important we should know about what got you there?
I think what it looks like now is me not obsessing about needing to know the answers. And that has been the gift that was given to me by having a teacher that needed to know all the answers and to convince people around her that she knew everything, that she had them. And I do not want to discredit this person. She has shaped me into the person that I become. She is a scholar. I've never met anybody who is so well read and knows her stuff when it comes to this field of metaphysics and the occult. I've never met somebody who was so capable. And at the same time, there are shortcomings that come with that in the power that comes with this field and having the answers for people. And I think that's why I have a very small audience and a small client base, because I'm not going to pretend like I can tell you who you are or what you need to do with your life. I'm not going to tell you, oh, this bad thing happened to you because this is the metaphor behind it.
Yeah. Or this is your karma and here's, all of this. That is such a challenge, I think. And it is for me like the core of a spiritual practice and a spiritual life, right? Is that we really want the answers. Like I want somebody to tell me, I think I want somebody to tell me what's going to happen. I think I want somebody to tell me if you just do X, Y, and Z, then, right? Here's the one magic mantra or magic practice or book to read that will unlock all of these secrets, and then you will be free and at ease forever. I think so much of initial spiritual practice for people is we're so hungry to understand, like, why am I like this? Why is the world like this? And it's such a challenge, I think, to be in the role that you and I sit in, right? From different vantage points. That people come to you thinking that you're going to give them the answer. And really all you do is ask them a lot of questions, right? And yeah, just like what a conundrum it is, right? That like people call you and they're like, Bear, why am I this way? And how do I fix it?
Yeah. And it's really easy to fall into that trap of wanting to know the answers for people because you get adored. And, I think that my students trust me because I tell them when I don't know shit. And I tell them, if someone says that they have all the answers, you need to walk away from that person. You need to walk away.
If you meet a Buddha in the road, right?
Yeah, I think, the Dharma has been a really important part of my path. And, there's a translation that like, you are all the books one needs. And at some point, that is when you become an occultist or an esoteric practitioner, is when your body becomes the instrument and the only instrument that you need. And I wish that I could say that's fully true for me. You know, I wish that my somatic experience was so clear and that my intuition was so spot on. But that's not what it means to be human. I wouldn't be here living my life if I was that evolved. I'm still learning. And I think that I will always be learning. And that is what makes me a good teacher and a good student at the same time, is that I still haven't gotten it figured out. I just know that hunger that you describe, that hungry ghost energy of like wanting to consume, reading so many books, taking so many classes, you know, putting yourself through rigorous, like ascetic journeys to just try to figure out what the fuck you are. And at the end of the day, you're just some schmuck, just like everybody else, trying to figure it out. You know, I was joking with my friend that I'm staying with, like I went and moved up to a retreat center in Vermont in 2011. And it was a Tibetan Buddhist center in the Shambhala tradition, which has since kind of evolved. But it was a really important part of my journey because it was 3 months. 1 month of that was complete silence and about 12 hours a day of meditation. And it changed my brain. That was the turning point for me, from going from one place to the next. And if that's our apex, like I can give you the before and after story of that. But my big takeaway from that journey was that I was relationship obsessed. And I don't know, I don't want to say like just boy crazy because I'm pansexual, but like certainly having like fixations on people, codependency issues. That was my big breakthrough takeaway. And I was so disappointed about that because I thought I was going to have this like existential awareness about my soul's journey. And it's like, no dumb shit. Like you're a Libra rising, your sun is in the 7th house, and you have a fixation on relating.
On relationship.
Yes.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, exactly. You need to, yes, I feel that one. God, it's so, and you know, I'm thinking about like the way you described your young self and like being miserable, right? And having all of that struggle. Mm-hmm. And I think so many of us who end up sort of in, you know, teacher, yoga teacher, Reiki teacher, astrologer, you know, all of that sort of spiritual healing role. That's how many of us start. It's like, I was fucking desperate. I wasn't gonna make it. And I clung on to the only things that seemed to bring a little glimmer of light or hope or something. And I just kept doing that. And like selfishly, I just was like, you know, I'll just learn more and I need to, right? And in that way, like that, the struggle is the doorway. It is the assignment, right? It is the invitation into the work, right? Into our work. But it doesn't feel like a gift at all at the time. You know, it feels like, I mean, I hate to use that metaphor, but it does. It feels sort of like a cross to bear.
You can only emit as much light as you've integrated shadow. And I think that the people who go to the darkest corners of their consciousness, which I think is why I was so interested in substances at a young age, my body felt like shit all the time. And I just have to emphasize that I hated being in a body from the earliest ages I can remember, because I was always uncomfortable. I was always dehydrated. I was always in pain. It hurt to urinate my entire childhood. I had a hard time defecating. I had weird food things. I was always on medication. Then my back started hurting, and then hormones hit in, and like it was just I hated being in a physical body.
Having a body sucked.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And TV was like my favorite escape as a child, was like books and television. And I had an Aquarian sort of Pisces grandfather, you know, those cusp energies right there. And I mean, he like really introduced me to the world of cinema and of storytelling. And, you know, I remember getting my first Greek mythology book that was illustrated, and I was like, I'm Venus embodied, even as like a little 9-year-old. And that wrapped around this past year with the Venus cycle on my son while I went through my mastectomy. So there's been like a lot of wraparound with Venus energy and being a Libra rising and having that as a chart ruler. So there's been a lot of like exalted experiences with my life, right? And I don't know exactly where I was going with this, but I think that television, escapism, which also comes through limerence and through relationships, it's a way of escaping itself, and drug use, substance use at an early age, and wanting to experiment and see where my mind could go. And, if my mom and dad are listening, this is not your fault. This is just who I was. This was what it meant to be a kid in the Midwest in the 90s, right off of I-80, is just trying substances. And there was, acid and mushrooms and smoking opium and lots of weed and lots of just like experiences, right? And I think those, especially the psychedelic journeys that I took, really, I think, prepped me for meditation work, because your mind can go to terrifying places. And a lot of people avoid meditation or doing self-work because their inner monologue is so strong, their imagination is so vast, their consciousness is so broad that it's really
like
scary.
Staring into the abyss, right? It's like there actually are no limits there. And it's so funny because for all sorts of reasons, I think I've always had this internalized fear that if I started using substances, I would never stop. And so that combined, right? Like Venus and Virgo, exactly opposite my moon in Pisces. That I've had a mostly sober life, and I now now that microdosing and all that stuff is getting kind of like popular, and like meet especially like guys who were in their 40s and 50s and like have kind of had a straight-laced life, and they're like, but
ayahuasca.
have you exactly and I just keep they're like, but don't you want to? I'm like, I've had some really extraordinary experiences with a sober mind, and I think about, what Maharaji says to Krishnadas about that, right? That like the LSD, the yogi medicine, it lets you in the room with Christ, but you can't stay there, right? It just turns on the light so that you're like, okay, wait, what's in that room? Okay, and then the lights go off again. Right? It's like the thing that you're looking for is actually there. And now you have to like feel your way back without that like otherworldly, without that external.
Well, it's so interesting being in our culture, because like pleasure is do you have a word for it? I just feel like there's like a control or a domination that comes with pleasure, and that we like try to avoid it, but we're also seeking it at the same time. And I think that the works of like Audre Lorde and like pleasure activism is one of the books that I haul down here. And I just keep thinking about the importance of pleasure, and how by abstaining from it or thinking that that's the right thing to do, we end up just like suppressing this natural force within us. And I really believe that desire is the most creative drive within us. It draws us towards other people. Like my desire to connect to you is leading towards this experience, or my desire to feel freedom is connecting to this other experience. Desire as the root of all suffering is because of the attachment to desire, not desire itself.
Right. It's like learning to use all those things wisely, right? And I think part of it is the inheritance of like a puritanical, right?
Yes.
And that's part of that is the history of the country, but part of that is also the inheritance of Christianity. I'll use that term like loosely. I don't think that that's across the board in Christianity, but there definitely like there are some messages, right, about that.
Yeah.
I think there are messages about that in a lot of religious tenets, right? That says like, don't enjoy the physical realms. And when you don't, you never learn how to work with that, right? It's like if you always avoid it, then you have no skills, to navigate, right? And if you're, and then it carries this, yeah, sort of shadowy control. You know, what is the thing about, you know, what you suppress grows.
Well, they say that about addiction. Like, I've been sober, just celebrated 15 years on August 1st. And they say
Congratulations.
that,
Yeah.
thank you, day at a time.
Yeah.
Anybody out there who's like pursuing this path, like, I could not imagine getting 15 years. Like, I never imagined living a day without a substance. And here I am all these years later. But uh, while we're working on ourselves spiritually, our disease, our addiction, our hunger is in the parking lot doing push-ups. Right. So we always have to be really vigilant about our spiritual path and our journey. And yeah, we can take breaks, right? But that doesn't mean that the opposite side of us is not like toiling or doing work in the backdrop, right? Because like shadow and suppression and the subconscious, like it is always back there doing the work on us. And coming into our life, if we're not doing the work to embrace the erotic and embrace the subconscious pieces of us. And like works like Existential Kink by Karen Lovewell, man, like what a game changer. Like I had a weird existential kink dance with that book, like the weirdest foreplay for years with like, I don't know about the name of this book and I don't know about this author. And I was like, damn, this is some kinky brilliance is what this is. And essentially it's like the things that we try to suppress end up controlling us. And these subconscious drives of needing support or needing things and not having our needs met will show up in our lives the way that we kind of self-destruct. And it's really about communicating with those parts of our consciousness and being like, I see you, bitch. All right, like how can we play this out in a safe way? How can we work with this energy in a safe way and try to like embrace it and make friends with that rather than trying to hide? And that's where the love and light bullshit is really grotesque to me, is that you can't like, I have a great quote of spiritual bypassing, if I can just like pull that up. I feel
Please.
like we're kind of all over the place, but I'm absolutely here for this conversation. And
Yeah, go ahead.
yeah. Well, it's spiritual bypassing and also coming from a culture that is as puritanical as it is and sanitized. And I think that, I went through a period of trying to connect with my Irish roots through music and through learning how to play the bodhrán and like going to Ireland and like connecting with these landscapes and spaces and culture and paganism and all of these like root system pieces. As an American, I feel really bored by our bland ass oatmeal culture. I just get really annoyed. Like, where are our celebrations? Where is our joy? And they become these like very sanitized, packaged experiences of like chocolate box on Valentine's Day and Christmas looks like this. And
It's so funny. I know. I'm like, and we talked even before we started recording about like, the woman that you're staying with comes down for Mardi Gras every year. And I was like, oh, right. I have to always remind myself. I'm like, oh, New Orleans is not like the rest of the United States.
no, I think that there's a celebratory culture there. And I'm from the Midwest, which is this like kind of blanket statement of a landscape where there's a lot of space, a lot of very rich soil, and a lot of like really lazy people as a result of that. I think that the soil that raises us, like it really kind of shapes who we are. You grow up in a city and it's like you're a dandelion coming through a crack. Like you have to like really do the work to kind of come from those spaces. Unless of course you're like a potted plant in like a rich person's home or
I know,
something.
I was about to say, right?
Yeah,
Like,
there's.
I mean, I also think that it's, there's so much, I mean, look, I didn't grow up in the Midwest. I did live there. It was very different, obviously, than
Yeah,
the
in
South,
school.
certainly than the American South. Yeah. And there is I think it's also easy for us to take the soil, the location that we grew up in, for not exactly for granted, but like we want to learn new things. We want to learn from other people. We want to,
Transplant.
transplant. We want to, I do also think about this as like the inheritance of being an American is that like we're so curious and fascinated by the exotic, right? Or something different from what we have. And so we don't, it's so hard to see what's right in front of us too, you know?
Yeah.
Okay,
I have to pull back my lazy statement about like Iowa and the Midwest because like farmers are very hard workers
I
and
was
like,
about, that was my first.
right. It's like I am cut from a certain type of cloth and I have a lot of history of farming in my background and very, very disciplined human beings. And so there's not laziness per se. It's just there's this like richness and sometimes it's like this is enough. Like and I'm hungry for more. Like I want a big
Exactly.
life.
Yeah, yeah. It's like, exactly. It's not lazy. It's very earnest is sort of the word that comes through to me, right? It's simple. It's like, although I will send you, remind me to send you a poem about corn from the 1850s. Yeah, anyway, I feel like you will appreciate it.
Yes, yes, I will. It's funny, like I'm allergic to corn and soy, which is what Iowa like absolutely like is the producer of. And I was at the
Yeah.
Georgia O'Keeffe Museum the other day in Santa Fe, and I was really drawn to this painting. And of course, it was corn out the gate. I was like, okay, all right, I see you. Because green is just part of like my consciousness. You know, it's like just these big fields. But I
Okay.
think, yeah,
Wait, the spiritual bypassing
yeah,
thing.
spiritual bypassing. I think that because of this whitewashing of our culture and the stripping of our ancestral roots, depending on, I don't know your background
Yes.
necessarily, but like we, even European Americans have an indigenous background in Europe and had their own practices that got decimated by
Yeah.
big church, right? Like big pharma, but it was like big church hundreds and hundreds of years ago. And like,
I love that comparison.
just like stripping down like pathways of being and saying this is the right way, this is the only way, which is like, ugh, it's just so gross and so violent. And I think that there is this hunger and so many people leaving faith systems. And my God, the amount of evangelicals and ex-evangelicals that I relate with in my psychotherapy practice, my astrology practice, and just like in life in general shocks me. And I think that astrology has become this kind of neutral ground for people to experience spirituality because it can be earth-based, which is one of the ways that I experience astrology.
Yeah. And that was, I've had exactly that same experience in yoga, right? It's like people are coming for this experience of being alive, which I think is profoundly spiritual, right?
Yes.
And they don't exactly understand what it is that's happening in a yoga class. All they know is they want more of it. Right?
Right. And that's where the spiritual shopping cart comes in. You know, Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche wrote so much about that. And like, we can have a gallery space of our spiritual experience, right? And maybe there's one beautiful vase in the center of the room or one really beautiful canvas painting on the wall. But instead of just allowing these like simplicity things to like our practice of meditation and our connection with nature, perhaps, that we start to fill this room with junk from all of these different faith systems, from all of these different belief systems. And then we just are like throwing everything into the shopping cart and really overwhelming a beautiful space with too much crap. And it's like, and it's not even crap that we're honoring as sacred because we're plucking it and it's going on our walls and getting dusty. It's not being treated with the sacredness it deserves.
We're just trying to collect stuff. We're just collecting it. We want to acquire it.
I had this experience.
I've been guilty of that. Yeah, 100%.
All of us. And
yeah.
I think that's why, you know, if I'm going to recommend a book, Spiritual Materialism, written by Chögyam Trungpa Rinpoche in like I think the late 60s. This book is so profound and can just be studied your entire life because of the way that we try to collect experiences. Or I went on retreat and my life changed, right? I mentioned that, the before and after. But I was a different person in 2011 than I am today. That experience led into this one. But if I use that as this like, oh, I went on retreat and this is what makes me who I am, that's spiritual materialism, right? And the bypassing quote that I was going to bring up was the term was coined by John Welwood in 2000. And he describes it as the tendency to use spiritual practice to bypass or avoid dealing with certain personal or emotional unfinished business. He states that a person struggling with life's developmental challenges are particularly susceptible to spiritual bypassing, as they attempt to find themselves by giving themselves up or prematurely trying to move beyond their ego to self-transcendence, ignoring their personal and emotional needs. So this attempt to create a new spiritual identity in order to avoid the pain of working through those unresolved psychosocial issues does not work and frequently causes additional problems.
Yes. My favorite nutshell that I think is his exact quote is that spiritual bypassing is avoidance in holy drag.
That's awesome. I am here for that. That is like the most Neptunian statement. It's like put lipstick on it. Yeah.
Exactly. It's like such a simple, right? You're like, oh yeah, you're trying to get out of what's real. And it turns out that our spiritual practices are designed to bring us face to face with what's real.
Right.
And so if your spiritual life isn't doing that, it's good to notice.
Right. Right.
Right.
Yeah. I think as a Chiron and Taurus generation person, I feel like learning to like every meal as sacred and every shit that you take is sacred. Like that is kind of the experience of being in this world, right? That our body is this sacred journey of pleasure and suffering and like all of the contrasts of life, and that we have to experience all of it, which is the consumption and the excretion. And we start to like sanitize again. We try to separate what's good and what's bad because people were disgusted with themselves and they felt like there was something beyond our dirty physical world that was better. And we painted this picture of like a white light heaven that doesn't have any poop. You know?
That's very clean. Exactly. It's like there's no dust in heaven. Right? I don't know that I've ever really thought about that before, but yeah, I mean, like all of those pictures are very, it's like, it's just very clean and orderly. And
Right.
Okay. You and I could go down this rabbit hole, I think, for a long time.
Yes.
I want to start with spiritual practices. Like what, especially in this latest, like you have had, we just talked a little bit about, like you've had a pretty intense year, right? Like major heartbreak, major, professional shift, also major health crisis, and, preventative mastectomy, and recovering from all of that. What have the spiritual practices been that have kept you going through all of that?
I gave myself permission to wallow and writhe and feel like a victim and to be angry and resentful and feeling abandoned and I felt everything. I allowed myself to grieve in a way that was so luxurious, even though it was awful, But I really gave myself permission to feel like I was dying, because that's exactly what happened this past year, was that there was a death, and I had to go through that process and through that gateway to come back on the other side. And I think that allowing
fucking Pluto square, man. That is exactly what my Pluto square felt like. Exactly what it felt like.
Yeah. It's an ugly journey. And I mean, I'd like to think that when we're doing our work that transits are not as impactful. So apparently I was being blindsided by, here's my thought. This is kind of my psychotherapy thought, even though it's not evidence-based whatsoever. But if we're not in alignment, depression shows up, anxiety shows up, relationship issues show up. Like things show up to kind of prove to us like, yo, you're not where you're supposed to be. And I fought and clawed and tried to control the situation and to change things. And I went through all of it. Like it was such a human experience. And I called my friend Ethan Nickturn, who's a Dharma teacher on the East Coast. And I was like, I feel like a piece of shit teacher, like that I'm feeling all of these things, that I'm like roiling, that I'm going through it. And he's like, this is part of being human, right? This is just part of the journey. And like relationships and our attachment issues are not, you can't sanitize those, to use that word again. Like I would have been bypassing my own experience by being like, okay, moving on, right? Like And I wish that I could have done that, but my attachment system was fucked. It revealed a lot of the issues that I was not coherent of, right? Like that's
Yeah.
part of that
You
revealing
hadn't
process.
yet. Exactly. That like next layer, next level.
And I allowed people to love me this year. I allowed spirit to show up for me, even though I didn't quite understand at the time that, like, I don't like the word angels, blah, whatever. It's like messengers to me, right? But all of these messengers showed up in my life in the most random, chaotic way. But they were these like beacons of hope when I was like literally in the dark muck of insanity and chaos. And they couldn't pull me out of my swamp, but they could hold a torch for me and cheer me on as I was moving through the like Atreyu swamp of sadness. It was
Yeah. The mess.
so
Yeah.
bad.
I mean, I think about it as like they just like sit at the outside and just witness what's
Right.
happening.
You were one of those people.
But like in a culture that is so obsessed with sanity, sanitation, right? It's like we want it to be clean. We have okay, great. You have a three-day bereavement period. At 6 months when people are still grieving, it becomes a clinical diagnosis,
Right.
right? And from the outside, it's so extraordinary because the two things that you just described, I feel viscerally in my bones of getting to this place of utter devastation where I could no longer fight the wallowing or the why me or I've done everything right. I've done all of the work. I've done all the things. How can it possibly, like, how is this what's happening? And one of the things that, like, I allowed myself to just be in that full place. And I also, for the first time in my life, was able to rage at God.
Yeah.
Right? At the divine, I was just like, fuck you. Like, I did everything I was supposed to do. How is this what I'm getting right now? Like, how is everything falling apart?
Yeah.
And I had exactly the same experience of like, and then people showed up and they just witnessed me in that place. And they loved me. And I learned how to receive help and support, which I had never really learned how to do until that. I had it all figured out and been in control right up until then.
Yeah.
And I was like, I didn't have it in me. I just like fell apart. And so it's really like, it feels like a privilege to be able to show up for people in that moment. Right?
Right. And to receive support and also guidance that your ego may be clawing against. And that's some of the pieces that were so difficult because you're just in it and you feel like you'll never smile again. You'll never feel joy again.
Yeah.
And I created a lot of ceremony around my insanity, having composting practices and grief rituals on the like Scorpio new moon last year. And I made artwork every day based on the lunar cycle. And that coincided with my my MRIs and my biopsies coming bad and the hyperplastic tissue and needing, all the biopsies, all of the things that I went through, mammograms, like all of that coincided with having to make these decisions. And then once I made the decision to have a preventative cancer mastectomy because my risk was over 50%, my mother had breast cancer. I kept running into people and it was just like, I asked for help. And then I created ceremony around it. I made this giant calendar and I filled it with artwork. I filled it with desire. I went on a solo trip for the first time in my adult life to the ocean. I grieved and I cried. I had nude photos taken of me that were just absolutely breathtaking, like just honoring. Because like I have to say, I was a figure model for 15 years, maybe longer if I count some of the off periods or whatever. But it's like I really loved my breasts. And I feel like having to give up the absolute favorite part of my body felt like the ultimate sacrifice to live, my choice to live. And, and I chose to have replacements put in because I just, it was gender affirming. I wasn't ready to go flat. There was a lot of decisions that come into place when you have to make these difficult decisions. And I trusted the process. I trusted the astrology. And I kept saying, like, I don't know why I'm in a fist fight with God right now. Like in every other part of my life, I've trusted these terrible circumstances and these squalls. And I found buoys to hold on to when the water was too rough. And those are the people in our lives. Those are the practices in our lives. I meditated. I went to yoga and just sobbed and sobbed and sobbed because I was about to give up yoga it was over 2 months until I could do yoga again.
Yeah.
Having a mastectomy is like not as simple as it sounds. Like there is so much healing that's involved, and having to sit still when your mind is spiraling on the inside, and people will get in touch with you, and that's super triggering, like on your most vulnerable days of your life, right? And they'll get in touch with you, make it about them or make it seem like it's about you, and all it does is just stir the pot even more, right? Especially when like the people that harm you the most are still poking their face in.
Yeah. And then you physically just have to sit still and be in it.
Yeah. I wasn't allowed to walk. I couldn't walk my dog. And I had to really allow community to support me because I didn't have a partner to go through this journey with. And that meant allowing people to see me at my most vulnerable. And I don't know if to me, this feels like a spiritual practice and really allowing myself to be witnessed. And, I did mantra practice. I, attended therapy. And at some point I was so angry and bitter and I was just pissed off. I was just so fucking angry that it felt like I got dealt this shit hand and that everything was going better for other people, which is not necessarily true. Right. But that's the way that we paint ourselves.
Feeling.
Right. We paint ourselves into a corner. We look at the window of social media as this toxic postcard from the beyond, right? Some fancy fucking holiday. And we only write happy things online. And I shared my shit online. I was like, I am in a tortured state. I feel like a victim. I have to go through this thing that I would never, ever choose to do. But it was the only options. It was terrible. And at some point I had to change the way that I thought. And that's when metacognition came in for me. And goofy things like somebody sent me a podcast with, was it Glenn Doyle or somebody doing the Let Them? I can't remember which.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's Mel, what's her
Mel
face?
Robbins.
Thank you.
Robbins? Yeah.
Yes.
And that Let Them practice was really important in changing the way that my mind was working. Because there was a period where I stopped eating and I stopped sleeping for 2 months last year. And it took a ketamine journey, which I would never, ever do, ever, unless I was so desperate, because I thought I was going to unalive myself.
Yeah.
And I had to make a desperate choice because I was not sleeping. I was absolutely insane, beside myself. I was put into a situation where I was houseless. I didn't have any money, and I was just relying on community to catch me in the falling down the fucking rabbit hole void that was this last year. And ultimately it came down to, what do hot girls do? And that was the thing. That was the thing.
I love that practice. Oh my God, that's amazing.
So this, I think, was in April of this year where I had to change my brain. And I was working on starting my associate's psychotherapy practice because everything had been set behind. I passed my advanced practice social worker degree, but at some point it was I had to start thinking differently. And I never have felt like a hot girl ever in my entire life. And it was just hot girls get their nails done. And I went and got these ridiculous nails that I wore all summer. And now it's feral girl fall. So they're just back to where they were. But I started wearing false eyelashes because I cried so fucking much that I couldn't keep mascara on. So that was a practice this last year, which was a Venus hack all the way, where I was I feel terrible, but at least I feel cute, And I got a job at the cool coffee shop in my neighborhood in Milwaukee called the Daily Bird in River West. Because I was like, well, the hottest girl in River West would go get a job at the cool coffee shop. And that allowed me to rehab my arms and to find community, and flirting like saved my brain, which is like the goofiest thing. You think, oh, is this a spiritual practice? Yes, it is. Connecting with other human beings is a spiritual practice. And maybe that is my Libra rising journey, right? Venus in the 6th house and Pisces. Like, let me connect to other people through the form of service and through connection, like all of the ways that we do. And that way of relating and allowing myself to be witnessed in this horrific aftermath gave me joy. And I went back to Mexico, where I'd been living in all of 2024. And I sort of reclaimed the ocean for myself and reclaimed a part of myself in that experience. I came down to Santa Fe to visit a friend. And now, I mean, it's just sort of like following the path, because everything that I had imagined for myself completely dissolved. And that is part of the leaping faith process that comes with our human journey, is that every time that we try to control, what happens? We don't get what we want. Life points us in a different direction. We change, we evolve, right? We can't just be these static creatures. So the more that I've learned to let go, the more fun I have ultimately, because I was clinging to something that was not working, and spirit was like, oh yeah, Jupiter opposite your natal Uranus. This is the like break free process, like the you're welcome, you'll thank me later experience. And again, it was like that fighting God. Like I could see in my astrology, I knew that everything was going to work out, but I had to go through that dark night of the soul. And no one wants to go and be uncomfortable. No one wants to do that shit. But that is what it forces us to get stronger. And now I've come out of this hell realm with new information. And, you know, thank you for asking me to speak on your podcast. But it's like I'm trying to integrate whatever this experience was, but I'm not going to know for some time. But I know right now that I am reconcentrating my energy after it's been completely diluted and dissolved and spread out. And, you know, what would hot girls do became like a mantra for other friends of mine. And it's like, we take care of ourselves. We plan ahead. We do meal prepping. We do, you know, and so it became like this kind of joke about, like, what do hot girls do? It's about taking better care of yourself and honoring who the fuck you are. And if that's just some like fake paradigm, so be it. It got me through a really dark period and made me laugh. And laughter is the best medicine. It's a high vibration. Humor breaks through all of the muck and the mire.
What's so interesting to me about that is that, wait, you started, that like the realization at that meditation retreat, right? Mm-hmm. That like, I'm like attached to people and all of this stuff. And that in this last round, that thing that you realized was a prison, right? Or like was a weapon you were using against yourself, right? That was limiting you, suddenly became a tool, you know? So it became like, okay, it's this. It's like, I can use all of my, I mean, I know that you appreciate the like character defect, right? Expired coping mechanism, right? Like you learn that like those skills actually are useful in a certain context, right? That like there's no part of us that is wrong, right? We just need to learn the right context to use those things in, and like how to use them in service of ourselves and other people, rather than, you know, always falling back into whatever habit those things, you know.
I think that's part of this. Yeah. The strengths-based perspective acknowledges that every maladaptive behavior has wisdom to it. Yeah. And that means that even like the darkest shit that humans do has their wisdom and there's basic goodness in it, to use the Shambhala language of like, at the core of everything, there is light, there is goodness, and it gets fractured by our human experience and by control and wanting to be right, you know, and that need to be right is so toxic. And, you know, I'm not like void of that, right? But I also am willing to like laugh at myself and to have questions, right? Like the way that I treat my Reiki practice or any practice that I bring into my life is that I don't fucking know. You know, like to say, oh, the violet flame of transmutation was dispensed by the ascended masters in the 1930s, right? Like that's what
Okay.
that's what I was taught. But like ultimately, if you are the only tool that you need, then my believing that something is going to be transmuted by imagining a violet colored light, thought directs energy. That is a vibrational medicine. And I don't need sage or appropriated tools because I can clear a room with my energy should I decide to do so. And that's the thing that we forget to do. It's like, oh, I need my tourmaline. No, you don't, bitch. Become tourmaline. Become the energy. Like that is what crystals and tools are meant to be, is these models of behavior or models of quality that we can resonate with, right? And yeah,
they're reminders. They're reminders of like, right? It's like you're not you were tourmaline the whole time, right? It's like, you know, your little friends, like not there because you need them, but because you see them and you're like, oh, right, that's right. I have all of that already.
Yeah. And I poke a lot of holes because I have put my time in, believe me, in these workshops, learning about, you know, astral soul healing and the 7 rays of wisdom and the 7 etheric bodies and like the parallel dimensions. And like, I've put the time in, and you don't hear me talking about that stuff because it's fucking irrelevant. We're in a body right now. Right. And if you are attracting astral souls, it's because you either like the drama or you're super gifted and need the practice. Right. And like, that's right. Like we all have these amazing gifts that we get to unlock, but you don't force it. You know, I remember thinking, oh, someday maybe I'll be psychic or maybe I'll become intuitive. And it was like the wanting actually pushed the ability away. And as soon as I gave up on it, that's when stuff started to get real, you know, because like when you're a little kid, you get a glimpse of these things. Like I mean, I could get into all those stories, but it's like, you know, ultimately it's like letting go is the practice. That is the ultimate practice. It's just softening. And everything else is candy coating for that, right? Because it's the core. It's just like, how are you going to soften? How are you going to be more spacious? How are you going to slow down?
I mean, it brings tears to my eyes because it really is that simple. It's not that easy, but it's really that simple. It's like, how can you soften? How can you let go? How can you be more loving? To everybody involved, especially yourself. Right. And that lesson is over and over again. And I think it's what I really needed to hear today.
Me too. Yeah.
What a gift. Is there anything you'd like to share before we close?
You know, I could tell stories all day with you, Vera, and so maybe we'll get a chance to have like the bear podcast part 2, right?
Yeah, exactly.
You know, I don't want to like plug myself necessarily, but you know, I practice telehealth in the state of Washington. That business is called Ursa Day Integrative Therapy. I am also a practicing astrologer. It's more of like a mirror practice, and that's why I call it as such. I see clients across the world for astrology readings, for mentorship, which is one of my kind of deeper journeys, so to speak. Like if you want to work with me long term, I will teach you just about everything that I know to ground you. I love to travel for teaching. So if you want a qualified Reiki teacher, I call myself a mentor and not use the other word. I would love to come and be in your space. I just love to celebrate human beings. And I feel like I finally have reconcentrated my energy again, that I can step back into service, because I really did have to pull back into my own. I needed to protect my energy this last year. So I feel like there is a reemergence. I put out a moon mailer every 2 weeks, which is just like my cutesy name for astrological.
So good. It's like a poem for the moment.
Yeah.
It makes me, they bring me so much joy.
Well, thank you for taking the time to read them. So I'm on Substack with that. The Moon Mailer, you can sign up for it. I'm sure Vera will like stick a
Put
plug
a little
in,
link to all the
little,
things.
yeah, to
Absolutely.
all the things. And I've written the Moon Mailer for almost 7 years, which really shocks me because I have no discipline. I can't commit to anything, and I committed to this practice of writing musings to the moon and doing astrological interpretation that is super grounded in language that is accessible, because astrology becomes inaccessible when we start to use all the technical terms. And the way that I experience astrology is through the somatics and feeling of a season, and the feeling of a season through a planet and the planet's motivations. And I write written astrology reports for people, these bespoke reports that are about 3,000 words. And I like writing baby charts, and I like writing them for grown-ups and for couples and for businesses. You know, I feel like the way that we can apply astrology, I don't know, I feel like I'm Dr. Bronner's all one, and it's very difficult for me to market myself, but I do have a lot of tools. I do have a lot of tools, and I do really love celebrating people and trying to unstuck folks, especially when they're in the mud. And as someone who has spent a lot of time in the mud this lifetime, like, I'm still shining, I'm still sparkling, even though I've been through some darkness. I got some scars to show it. I showed Vera before the podcast, but you know, we're resilient creatures. Humans know how to survive, and we will find a way. And I just love encouraging people to be the best version of themselves so that they can be tools and instrument of peace in this chaotic fucking world that we live in. And I love using astrology as a tool for social activism and for inspiration. And I am honored to be your friend, to call you my friend. And thank you for having me on the Curious Hearts podcast. Vera, I think you're such a gift to this world. I'm so grateful to be here with you today.
I'm so grateful that we went on that adventure in Seattle, and I can't wait to see what adventure brings us together again next.
Mardi Gras.
I was just thinking that. I was like, ooh. It's like Mardi Gras, and then you could do a Reiki training, and then we'll see. We'll see.
Those are thoughts. I like all of these thoughts.
Thanks for tuning in, Curious Hearts. If this episode was useful, I hope you'll follow the show or leave a review or share it with somebody who you think needs it. And if you're craving support on your own spiritual path or seeking some meaningful work, you can find ways to work with me at veralester.com. Otherwise, until next time, please stay grounded in that curiosity that you've got and keep turning towards what matters. See y'all soon.